Acts 2, verse 1. When the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord in one place.
As the writer of this book, I wrote, it wasn't a coincidence. It was divine timing. Pentecost, the day of harvest, came, and we were together. One mind, one purpose, one room. No leaders jockeying for position. No voices clamoring for attention. Just humble expectancy. The memory of his ascent is still fresh, and the promise of power echoes in our hearts.
Spiritual harvest begins with unity and waiting. By faith, we wait for instructions. To go it alone without guidance might be our impulse. However, though difficult, the greatest act of faith is simply to stay and trust his timing.
There was no warning, no soft breeze. It was unlike anything I have heard. It filled every crevice of the room. And somehow, it filled us too. It wasn't chaotic, but commanding, like heaven announcing its presence with unmistakable power.
Verse 2, I thought a title was appropriate. Heaven's sound pierces earth. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Acts 2:2.
Then there appeared to them divided tongues, as of fire, and one sat upon each of them. Acts 2:3. Not the fire that Moses feared, nor the fire Elijah called down, but a fire that chose to rest. Divided, yes, but not separated. One flame on each soul, not one above another. It wasn't spectacle, it was sacred. In that moment, the holy ground was no longer underfoot. It was within.
God's fire comes not just to dazzle, but to dwell. His Spirit doesn't favor the bold or the brilliant. He rests on the available. Ask yourself, if God's flame rested on me, would I recognize it as his invitation or resist it as discomfort?
And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Acts 2:4. Filled, not touched, not visited, but filled, overflowing. And then our mouths moved, not by memory, but by mystery. Words poured out that our minds didn't produce, yet our hearts embraced. Each tongue a witness, each utterance a spark of God's message beyond borders. It was no longer about what we knew, but what the Spirit chose to speak. Dwelling in Jerusalem at this time were Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. Jerusalem pulsed with devotion. Pilgrims from countless nations gathered for Pentecost.
Spirit-filled speech isn't merely eloquent, it's divine. When God fills us, our words become vessels of his will. Are you willing to speak what God places on your heart?
For the Jew, Pentecost was the 50th day after Passover, marking the Jewish Feast of Weeks, Shavuot, which celebrated the end of the grain harvest and the giving of the law at Sinai. But what they expected in the temple, they encountered in the streets. Heaven met diversity with intentionality. This wasn't a local moment. It was a global unveiling. God speaks into every culture. Borders do not bind his Spirit, but sent to bridge them. And when this sound occurred, the multitude came together and were confused, because everyone heard them speak in his own language. Confusion gave way to awe. The sound wasn't just wind, it was speech, familiar tongues spoken by unfamiliar men. The miracle wasn't just hearing, it was understanding. Pentecost reversed Babel's fracture.
The crowd heard the sound of a rushing wind, but in that sound they heard the gospel spoken in their own tongue and dialect. When they each heard the message in their own language, they were not only surprised, but also theologically confused. God knows how to reach the heart, often through the language only we understand best. The church begins not with uniformity, but with multilingual cultural witness. Ponder on this question: have I listened for the Spirit in voices I once dismissed?
The marvel wasn't just the message, it was the messengers. Galileans were common, rugged, provincial, not poets or polyglots, and yet God chose their mouths to speak global truth. This miracle shows us that the church begins not with uniformity, but with multilingual, multicultural witness.
The reference to Galileans is not neutral. It reflects a social stereotype. Galileans were considered uneducated and linguistically unsophisticated. That they could speak in refined foreign tongues was shocking. God often chooses the least likely to carry his most powerful truth. Just look at those he chose. All his apostles were untrained. They were average people with a divine message given to them by Jesus. The Holy Spirit empowered and emboldened them, causing them to speak in a language they did not understand. Ask yourself, do I disqualify myself or others based on background rather than calling? Acts 2:8-11, nations named to their amazement. And how is it that we hear, each in our own language in which we were born? And verse 9, Parthians and Medes and Elamites. Visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes. Verse 10, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya adjoining Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes. Verse 11, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them speaking in our own tongues the wonderful works of God. Acts 2:8-11 showcases the Spirit's power to transcend human limitations. As noted by Constable and Keener, the crowd's amazement stemmed not just from the message, but from the messengers. Galileans speaking in diverse native tongues. This miracle reversed Babel's confusion, signaling divine inclusion and global mission. David Guzik highlights the cosmopolitan nature of the gathering, emphasizing that the gospel was immediately multilingual and multicultural. Luke's listing of nations reflects intentional outreach. The Spirit speaks to all through the least expected. The event affirms that God's message is not confined by geography, education, or social status.
Follow along now while listening to verses 12-13. 12. So they were all amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, whatever could this mean? 13. Others mocking said, they are full of new wine. As I recall, the crowd's reaction was split, wonder and mockery. Some leaned in, hearts stirred by the mystery. Others scoffed, unwilling to believe that God could move through ordinary Galileans. I remember the tension in the air. Awe and accusation mingled like wind and fire. The Spirit had come, but not all were ready to receive. Some asked honest questions. Others dismissed the miracle with a sneer. It was the beginning of the church and the beginning of resistance.
The wind has passed. The words have landed. And now the choice remains. Some were amazed. Some were confused. Some mocked. But the Spirit still speaks. Across languages, across cultures, across hearts. The question isn't whether God is speaking. It's whether we're listening. Lean in. Ask. Don't dismiss the divine just because it doesn't fit your expectations. Because Pentecost wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of, the way, the name given to the new church. Thank you for clicking on my video link. I hope this video has opened your eyes to a spiritual life you may not have experienced before. Please click follow to keep up to date on new videos. I would like to invite you to our weekly forum study at Fellowship Bible Church, Middleburg, Florida, each Sunday at 9:30 a.m. Please visit our website, mefellowshipbible.org, for more information about our church and listen to our live broadcast weekly. Hope to see you at the forum. Until then, may God bless and keep you, and may His face shine upon you and give you peace.